very good morning. You're watching NewsX and I'm Shivani Singh. Iran has delivered a letter to Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, as well as members of the UN Security Council, protesting a recent statement made on social media by US President Donald Trump, in which he threatened to intervene in the ongoing protests and civil unrest against the government in Iran. Iran's United Nations Ambassador Amir Saeed Irvani in the letter has urged the UN to condemn unlawful threats towards Tehran, calling them to unequally and firmly condemn the reckless and provocative statements, describing them as a serious violation of the UN Charter and international law. Joining us live on the broadcast is my colleague Brian Thomas with more on this. Brian, we now are learning that Iran has delivered a letter to the UN Secretary General and members of the UN protesting that statement that has been made by US President Donald Trump.
Well, yes, as of now, Iran has formally delivered a diplomatic protest to United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres and to members of the UN Security Council, even after lodging a letter condemning recent comments by US President Donald Trump regarding the unrest in Iran. Now, very importantly, the letter sent by Iran's UN Ambassador Amir Saeed Iravani urges the UN leadership to de-announce the Tehran calls reckless and provocative threats from Trump, framing them as a breach of the UN Charter and a dangerous escalation amid rising tensions itself. And clearly, this protest also comes after Trump used his social media platform also to warn that the US was locked and loaded and ready to go and would even intervene if Iranian security forces violently suppress peaceful demonstrations sweeping across the country. Not only that, in his post itself, even Trump stated that Washington would act to protect protesters and also it will protect the protesters should the regime resort to a lethal force, which is a statement that has drawn sharp criticism from Tehran itself. Even in its letter, Iran has called on the Security Council to strongly and unequivocally condemn the U.S. rhetoric and to reaffirm Iran's sovereign rights to defend its territory and even people against any foreign interference. Not only that, even Iranian diplomats also accused the U.S. of double standards and cited past confrontation, including recent military actions in the region as context for their very objectives. Yes.
Right, Brian, I'd request you to stay on with us. In fact, in some more news, in the videos, Iranian protesters can be seen chanting as cars burned in front of a police station in the Lorestan province amid the country's largest demonstration in the last 3 years. The unrest began last weekend as business owners voiced frustration at the dire economic conditions in the Islamic Republic. Demonstrations have now affected 20 areas, mostly towns in the west of the country. Reportedly, slogans heard at protests now include "Death to the Dictator" and "Women, Life, Freedom." The US-based human rights activist news agency has reported about these developments. Well, Brian, obviously now we are seeing a lot of protests, a lot of chanting that is currently going on in the country. They're talking about freedom, they're talking about women's rights as well.
Intensified even as protesters chanted slogans and even set vehicles ablaze outside a police station even in Lorestan province, underscoring the scale and volatility of what has become the country's largest wave of demonstrations in nearly 3 years. Again, what videos we are flashing online also and we are showing on our TV, showing flames lighting up the streets as crowds are also being confronted security forces, and it also reflects the growing public anger and defiance itself. Even this protest erupted last week, like you mentioned, after business owners and traders began voicing sharp frustration also over Iran's worsening economic crisis marked by soaring inflation and a collapsing currency and shrinking livelihoods itself. Now, what started also as the economic descent has now expanded into broader anti-government demonstrations across multiple provinces, posing a fresh challenge also to authorities already grappling with deep public discontent. And now amid this escalating tension or unrest also, President Trump has also issued a stark warning on Friday through his very social media post, saying that if Iran acts violently and it kills peaceful protesters, which is their custom, the US will come to their rescue itself. Even, like I mentioned, also, like we also had a conversation about it, the fact that Iranian officials have also rejected the statement as foreign interference, while the development also has raised severe international concern also over the potential for further escalation as protests still continues to spread and security forces are tightening their response. Yes.
Right. Please stay on with us, Brian. In fact, in videos, Iranians take down the Islamic regime's flags during an uprising. Protests about the soaring cost of living in Iran have entered their sixth day after the rial plunged to a record low against the United States dollar in late December. After a number of deaths as a result of clashes between protesters and security services, the government of President Masoud Pezeshkian appealed for unity and blamed economic pressure on what he said are Tehran's enemies. Despite government promises to enact economic reforms and put more effort into tackling corruption, the protests have continued. So far, at least 7 people have been killed and 44 people have been arrested since shopkeepers in Tehran first shuttered their businesses on Sunday to protest against Iran's economic crisis. So, Brian, obviously this started out as a protest by the shopkeepers against the rising inflation, and now it's become a protest against the entire government.
Historic scenes are unfolding in Iran as protesters risk their lives to pull down symbols of the Islamic regime during overnight demonstrations. Videos are circulating also on social media showing defiant crowds removing flags associated with the ruling establishment, highlighting the depth of anger that is directed at Iran's clerical leadership. Now, supporters abroad also, including voices from Israel and from other democratic regions, have also come and expressed solidarity with the protesters, framing the uprising as a broader fight for freedom and dignity. They're calling for a free Iran. And these kind of slogans are growing louder as unrest still continues to spread, marking one of the most significant challenges to the Iranian leadership in years itself. Yes.